In the past, books lived in libraries or bookshelves at someone's home. But as time goes by, they could neither stand the stale air nor being left out, until they found a new home, the gallery. They are not what they used to be. They have a new name, artists' books. This video argues about how visual and textual elements interact in two different artists' books. Before we start the analysis, let me briefly introduce what is an artist's book, its definition, history, and features. Artists' books. From the name we can know that these books are created by artists or treated as an artwork. It also indicates a significant turning point that books are no longer the carrier of only literary works, but an object that incorporates with many art forms, painting, photography, sculpture, etc. This was described as mongrel nature, initially proposed by Lauf and Philpott in 1998 and later explained by Nola Farman. It is an aesthetic crossbreed that mixes fine art, low art, graphic design, multiple art and literature amongst all kinds of other things. Artists' books can be traced back to early 20th century, from visual poetics to suprematist book art. The 1960s saw a boom in artists' books, as Rachel Price states, that can be divided into three classes: to move out of language and turn to visual media, to treat the book primarily as sculptural forms, or towards print and language from visual arts. There are different words to refer to artists' books as shown at the beginning of the video. For example, anti-books, proposed by Harry Polkinghorne in 1991, that question the physical and conceptual foundations of the book, seriality, identity, and the art marketing system. He had an interdisciplinary view on artists' books. The book as an artistic medium has been with us, in one form or another, since books have been present in our culture. What has become known as book art, bookworks, or artists' books. Since about 1960 allows, even requires, reconsideration of the nature of the book as an aesthetic medium and as a cultural form. Even when considering traditional books made up of text alone, we frequently forget that the design of books is as much an art as architecture, or painting, or sculpture. It exerts an aesthetic influence upon more people than any other art. Similarly, Jessica Prinz used non-book to refer to some contemporary books. She said, "Some contemporary books blur the distinction between book and sculpture, presenting three-dimensional objects that toy both with the shape of the book and its definition. As it blurs disciplinary boundaries, the contemporary non-book questions its own status as a book, thereby enriching and enlarging our definition of what a book might be." We can see that they define the artist's books by denying the traditional concept of the book, the carrier of literary text. The only similarity is to have a book form, but what distinguishes artists' books is that the book is used as the material, like canvas for painting or stone for sculpture. The materiality of the book has been the key to identifying an artist's book. Let's look inside the artist's books. Text and image are two significant elements in artists' books. There is already a book that explores text-image relationship. Its introduction reveals artists' books as an important research object to investigate into text and image. Linda Goddard also studies text and image by listing several contributors discussing visual qualities in artists' texts. They reached a consensus that text and image are no longer dichotomous, they are all visual primarily. This was demonstrated further in Martin Sundberg's article, where the word-image dichotomy collapses in artists' books and graphic novel. He accepts Thierry Gronstein's urge to bring word and image together in analyzing artists' books and uses this approach to his analysis of Paul Zelavansky's artist's book, The Case for the Burial of Ancestors. But in different artists' books, the text-image interactions can be variable. Some play with typography, some show the painterly property through text, others simply juxtapose text and image. Specifically, the two artists' books I choose are about text and drawing. They are Berlin Night by John Hejduk, and Prose Architectures by Renee Gladman. Although both of them contain text and drawings, their interactions are totally different. Let me explain this in the rest of the video. Berlin Night is a book of paintings by John Hejduk, an American architect who is famous for his concept of mask. This book, inspired by the German painter Max Bachmann, includes a series of his watercolor paintings and his thoughts of the function of architecture in a poetic way. SOM Foundation gives a concise description to this work. He gives voice to this contention with extensive explorations and peerless sign language. The essay with which the publication opens indicates how Hejduk's work leads to the essence of architecture. As Hejduk is an architect, critics pay more attention to his mask theory. He gives architecture a highly symbolic shape and endow it with concrete characters like human. In an architectural seminar in Tongji University, Professor Zhang Yonghe summarized Hejduk's mask theory. Hejduk believed that architecture should have a concrete character, a phenomenon of personification in which architecture is imbued with personality or character. Specifically, architecture is often influenced by representational media such as axonometry, perspective, orthographic projection, and so on. However, he rarely used perspective because he aimed to detach the subject from representational media. Just as we depict a person without the need for their orthographic projection, if architecture is also considered a character, then it can exist independently of representational media. This is likely something that occupied his thoughts in his later years. But Hejduk's works are not only about architecture and drawings. Rather, he creates his own language within a drawing. The medium is, of course, these symbolic architectures. This book has two parts. The first part, ranging from pages 1 to 27, are mainly textual, including the title, an essay about this book, introduction, an iconic passage, a table, the project text, and contents named subjects objects. The rest of the book contains 32 drawings of symbolic architectures. We also noticed that there is always a tracing paper in the middle of two drawings, each side printed with different explanatory texts. The tracing paper can overlap with either drawing. As we turn the page, we see many labels falling on their corresponding buildings. This is like reading a map of a place we are totally unfamiliar, so we automatically turn to the text for help. In reality we speak to ask the way, but on paper we need a different semiotic system. Hejduk uses icons and symbols densely in this book. In page 19, he alternates literary text and icons in a narrative passage. These icons help the reader understand this passage as a metaphor. The mobile units, probably referring to the buildings, is followed by the icon of a group of people. They go on a predetermined route, illustrated with a wagon and many horses. But the pattern of wagon changes every time it appears with different groups of people appearing, as the text says the mobile units have gone to different synagogue sites. This is the first page Hejduk tries to tell a story with non-literary text. In the next 2 pages, he makes a table where he lists types of architecture, material, quality, music, poetic language, etc. At the top there are 7 wagons that correspond to the icons in the previous page. They are aligned with the table, as if each wagon signifies a row of conceptions. I only find 2 examples presenting a direct connection, the first wagon with an X mark, a symbol, and a poem can also be a symbol. The last wagon drags a bag of universe, exactly the same as earth, sun, moon, stars. Although literary text prevails in the first part, textual and iconic elements are juxtaposed and contribute equally to the whole text. However, in a global perspective, these pages are only the beginning of Hejduk's ambition. The most interesting part is yet to come. Turn to pages 24 to 26, Subjects Objects. It looks like table of contents. There are 73 different objects listed in total. All of them have their names and functions written in text followed by an icon. Looking into these pages, it's easy to find that the text and icons are complementing each other. If you still don't know what they are, just read the rest of the book. You'll find some objects that look familiar to these icons. In fact, many icons have corresponding objects in the drawings, such as number 34, 36, 49, 53, 55, and 72. In fact, these 73 icons, each having a different definition, are part of Hejduk's own language system of his mask theory. He arranges these objects within a paper, as if to write in a graphic language. The tracing paper also plays a significant role. It is printed double-sided between two drawings, helps us identify these objects by labeling their names. If the text is printed beside each object, there will be a reading sequence from painting to text or vice versa. But thanks to the transparent tracing paper, we can see the painting and read the text at the same time. Seeing and reading thus becomes spontaneous. From this experience, we finally understand that Hejduk is writing a language of architecture. Each object is like a phrase, every different composition is like to arrange them within syntax. The visual elements become his text. Another example for textual and visual interactions is Prose Architectures, the first collection of drawings by Renee Gladman, a writer and artist born in Atlanta. It is also about text, drawing and architecture, but it's totally different in text-image interactions. Fred Moten described this book in the afterword. A book of ink drawings that regards language as an exposed nervous system, uncovering the moment whereby architecture emerges out of prose, the sentence becomes a drawing, and the act of writing narrative can be examined from bodily movements. Gladman beautifully uses the drawings as an extension of her writing process, as a way to free language from constraint. Gladman herself says a lot about visual and textual interactions, particularly writing and drawing in her works. She calls her works as drawing writing, drawn writing, or whatever combining drawing and writing. Her speech in Menil Drawing Institute introduces this idea.
So while the title of tonight's event is on drawing, I have never thought it to myself without adding the word writing, as in on drawing writing, or in another moment thinking on writing drawing, or later saying drawn writing. Because having brought the two together almost 10 years ago, they are to me now inextricable. And these variations, drawn writing, writing drawing, drawn writings, sometimes I refer to myself as a writer of drawings. These attest to the questions that inspired this dual practice in the first place. And those are, how can I go on writing without writing? How can I experience language as a nervous system, see it move, expand, react as energy, as an intelligence? How can I look mechanically at the way narrative builds and moves and decomposes? How can I talk about the way lines and marks, both intentional and accidental, make portals in the world, create bridges to unknowns and elsewheres? These are my questions, and they have led to many artist book projects, many wall drawings, many essays, and a couple of novels.
In her introduction to Prose Architectures, Gladman explores what drawing and writing mean to her. It quieted language. It produced a sense that thinking could and did happen outside of language. However, in contrast to writing, this line moved in time with thought rather than chasing through syntax, as something already over, a moment we can now only describe. According to Tom Donovan, she translates the energy of writing into a graphic form, as though drawing shared the same substrate as writing. When we study the drawings in Prose Architectures, we can often discern cityscapes, landscapes, and the cross-sections of structures. Some of them are easy to recognize while others in abstract forms. Hereby I classify these drawings into three categories. First, drawings with clear architectural shapes. Second, drawings concentrating on a small, linear part. Third, drawings that looks like writings. This classification presents a rise in the readability of the text, that is, how easy it is to recognize the strokes as some language. In fact, none of her drawings contains a definite readable text. But we can still recognize the shape of a written language like English. This makes me think of Su Bing's A Book from the Sky, which is filled entirely with meaningless glyphs designed to resemble traditional Chinese characters. The book is composed using a set of 4,000 characters, but none of them are existing Chinese characters. He also created square word calligraphy, a fusion of written English and written Chinese. The word takes on the ostensible form of a Chinese character, yet remains legible to the English reader. As participants attempt to recognize and read the words, their ingrained thinking patterns are challenged. A comparison is made between Su and Gladman to illustrate their resort to a different linguistic or semiotic system. Su Bing's book written in an unreadable language is actually another language, while Gladman's unreadable letters become drawing. This comparison enhances our impression of Gladman's drawing writing. The visual masquerades a literary text, but the text turns out to be a visual language. Another comparison can be made to concrete poetry. Gladman's work and concrete poems have very similar way to combine word and image. Concrete poetry is to use the language as a visual element, to arrange a static or dynamic shape of concrete objects. But compared to Gladman's work, concrete poetry doesn't eliminate all the readability, at least they retain the recognizable shape of letters. As in this picture, some drawings in Prose Architectures almost have a letter's shape, but Gladman avoids any clues to interpret these lines in a precautious way, as if telling us, you think it's a writing? Wrong. These are all drawings in nature. Can we say that Gladman has invented a new way of visual expression, neither to draw or to write, but to draw and write spontaneously? I think this radical destruction of language form is what distinguishes her works from others that still keep it readable. From these two artists' books, we can conclude that both of them integrate the process of drawing and writing. But the most important difference is whether the writing does happen. In Berlin Night, Hejduk doesn't show a real writing. Actually, writing is a metaphor of how he draws these architectures within a paper. However, Gladman's Prose Architectures are drawings and writings done spontaneously. The writing process did happen but is totally unreadable. It is a new way of visual creation. In short, Hejduk's writing is a metaphoric process, while Gladman's writing is a way to draw. That's all for this video. Thank you for embarking on this journey through the alchemical fusion of textual and visual elements in artists' books. But remember one thing, nothing can replace your first impression when reading an artist's book. It unfolds a different story between you and me.